A lot of great things begin at a table. A coffee, a letter, or an email. Maybe a first date with a girl or guy you always wanted to know. Perhaps an interview for a new job. Or the beginning of a future business endeavor. Let's say you were lucky enough for a second or third date. The table is the star of most family get-togethers and can even be used for a selfie with friends every once in a while. The bottom line is, tables are for talking. So take a seat and let's have a conversation. Welcome to Table Talks at the Gathering Church.
Our guest today has been at the Gathering Church ever since its beginning, of course. He has also been a vital part of the Way Out Ministries ever since he was a young boy. He was born and he was raised in Hawaiian Gardens and has traveled throughout Europe, Brazil, and Africa, and most recently to the Philippines, all doing the Lord's work. He is married, of course, to my daughter-in-law, and they have given Terrell and I two very beautiful grandchildren. He, of course, is my son, Ryan. He's going to be with us today at Table Talks. Good to have you, Ryan. Hey, how about that? Okay. I got a box of tissues up here because I obviously do not sound good.
It's because he's going to cry. Don't let him fool you.
Yeah.
You want to... Is that good? Oh, maybe a little bit down. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'll cry, but I might be humiliated. So this is a bit uncomfortable, Ryan, because I'm your dad. So let me just begin with a disclosure. Yeah, I have to do that. How many of you parents would sit in front of a whole bunch of people and interview your kid? Come on. And ask them questions about their childhood? I don't think so. So I need to say that, even Mary and Joseph lost the baby Jesus.
This is where he compares him and my mom to Mary and Joseph.
Yeah, that's right. For 3 days, they lost him. That's in Luke 2:43-51 if you want to check me out on that. So, just judge not, lest ye be judged in the parent department. So, Ryan, the first day, well, I guess it was the first day you were born. Mm-hmm. We brought you home. I took you proudly into my hands, and I lifted you up in sort of a Lion King sort of a way, and I lifted you right into the ceiling fan. And so that was the beginning. That was the beginning of our time together.
That's why I have so few memories. That explains a lot.
And then about a month or two later, I carried you in your car seat into an appliance store. Your mom and I were shopping for something. I think it was a refrigerator or something like that. And I was so excited about the appliances that I set you down. And then I just started looking. And then I ran into your mom and I said, "This is a good washing machine," or a good whatever it was. And she goes, "Where's the baby?" "Oh, I don't know." I set him down somewhere. So I was a little bit absent-minded as a father. So for those of you thinking about maybe fatherhood someday, there's no license, there's no test. You just get the goods, and then you're responsible for them. So, learn from lots of other older men, I would say. Talk to them and get your instruction. Ladies, you too, in the motherhood department. And then I do remember also, I just got to say this, because I do love you with all my heart. But when he was a toddler sleeping in his crib in Hawaiian Gardens, I remembered there was something that I had to do at this church. And I just forgot he was in there. And I drove away. And I went to the church, took care of my business in Artesia, came back, and I really didn't even realize that you were in there sleeping until I saw your mom pulling into the driveway. And then I suddenly had, oh my gosh, my son!
This is when you realize how faithful my mom is.
This was in the first, 2 months, I guess. I was just not.
She was prepping for 9 months, though, so,
And then there was that time, too, where when you were older, we were playing and having a good time. I would swing you around. Ryan loved to be swung around by his arms. Men, don't do this to your budding children, because I dislocated his arm. And, well, I think it was maybe 2 or 3. I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe, probably 3. Yeah, probably
I was
3.
little. I don't remember that, but I know the story.
But anyway, I just want you to know I really do love you. Ryan was always a resilient kid. You know, he always popped back. With that in mind, everybody, just, you know, Ryan's going to share some things. You might be like, wow. That was just to let you know love was there. It just wasn't, you know, always perfect. So long before, Ryan, you were conceived, your mom and I responded to God's call to begin a ministry here in Hawaiian Gardens. And we moved into a rented house on Arlene Street. But your memories don't really begin because of the fan incident.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Until we moved into the house on 224th Street. So what are your early memories of going to Hawaiian Elementary School and just being a kid?
So for you guys that are my age, 20-ish, you know, so people that are around my age, you'll remember that basically like in the, you know, I don't know, like early 90s time, there was a lot of racial tension in Hawaiian Gardens, and it continued for a very long time. Basically my entire childhood, there was a lot of violence in Hawaiian Gardens because of racial stuff. And so when I first started in elementary school, I just remember, like, you know, as a kid, you know, even though our culture today is trying to act like race is everything, and that every kid is, you know, there's this idea that everyone's racist and everyone has this deep-seated racism in their life, like, it's complete nonsense. I remember going to school and, like, not even really realizing that I was a white kid. Anyone that knew me, I didn't talk like a white kid. I didn't carry myself like a white kid, whatever that means, right? But I had really become part of the culture that I was born into. And so for me, like, just starting elementary school was like, oh, cool, I'm gonna start elementary school. And I remember specifically there was only 2 other, like, white kids in the whole school that I can remember. And they were not the kids I wanted to be associated with.
They were dorks.
They were serious dorks, yeah. And, you know.
Hopefully one of those kids isn't sitting in the audience.
No. And their mom made all their clothes. And so I remember they would, like, come to school in these really, like, you know, like these linen outfits. They looked like they belonged in a cult, to be honest. But so these 2 kids, someone that's my age, if they went to Hawaii, they're like, I remember those kids. They had, like, curly, puffy hair. And, you know, that's in now, but it wasn't when we were younger. So anyway, I didn't want to associate with them, but I had grown up with all Mexican kids because you 2 were obviously working with a lot of Latin Mexicans and stuff like that. And so that was all I really knew. So I was comfortable with that. So when I started elementary school, I went to go play soccer. And then I was not allowed to play soccer because I was white. So all the kids were like, nah, you're white, you can't play soccer with us. And I was like,
White boys can't kick?
yeah, apparently. They can't jump or kick, apparently. That sucks. We're just good at nothing. But yeah, I remember, like, kind of getting bullied a little bit, like, not really welcome into the group. And so I was like, whatever. So I left, and then I ended up playing basketball. And there was really serious segregation between Mexicans and blacks. And so the school was, I would say, at that time, almost like even I wouldn't say a full quarter, but there were a lot of black families that lived in Hawaiian Gardens at that time. And so I became really good friends with all of the black kids that went to the school, played basketball with them and had a good time with them, and kind of was outcasted from the Mexican friend group. But at home, because my parents were constantly working with high schoolers and junior hires that were Mexican, like, all my friends were Mexican. So all my friends, well, they were, like, you know, 5 or 6 years older than me, maybe even more than that, some of them. But I hung out with them all the time on the street and on the block that we grew up on. So all my friends on the street were Mexican, all my friends at school were black. And so that's kind of
Now, you
the
did get into a
introduction.
tiff with after school one time with
Oh, yeah. I think it was because of that racial tension, and I was always hanging out with the black kids in the neighborhood. There was definitely some trash talking at school. I probably said stuff. They probably said stuff. I don't remember. But I do remember that I got threatened to get jumped multiple times, and there was a group of kids. And I remember specifically because one of the kids looked like a junior in like high school. Like he was like, he looked to me like he was 300 pounds. He had a mustache, and he was in like, I don't know, 3rd grade with a mustache. This took me a long time, you know? But I just remember him and 3 other kids, like, you know, we would threaten to fight all the time after school, and then multiple times they like literally chased me all the way home, like to jump me. And then finally, I think I told Mom after like a week of this going on all the time, I was like, yeah, these kids, they keep chasing me home, and like, they're trying to beat me up and everything. And then I think she said something to one of the kids' parents, and that didn't go over very well.
No, it did
you
not.
know? It was
Almost
a pretty
had a mom fight.
Yeah, the mom was pretty ratchet, and then, you know, my protective mom can get pretty ratchet too. Don't let her fool you. So yeah, it kind of got a little wild. I don't remember what happened, but I told all the kids from the neighborhood on our street, yeah, these kids have been chasing me home, and they weren't having it. And so I think the older kids maybe took care of it and said something, because it just stopped like a couple days later. I know it wasn't because my mom said something. That's what I do know.
So did you ever end up getting in a fight?
I got in a couple fights. It was kind of normal, I think, like at least at that time, where you kind of had to show that you weren't scared of people. So I definitely had a couple fights. They were never like crazy violent or anything like some of the ones I saw later. But yeah, it was part of growing up.
So these guys on the street became like your mom and I saw
Mentors.
them. Your mom and I did not see them as mentors, but we saw them as almost like they treated you like a cousin, right? Like you were part of their family, right? And so they seemingly were very protective of you, and in some ways they were. I think that's why your fights stopped at school. I think they took care of business, but they also didn't exactly lead you in the most profound ways.
No.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I don't know where to start with all of that.
They nicknamed you.
Yeah, they nicknamed me. They nicknamed me Miklo. If you guys have ever seen, if you've ever seen Blood In, Blood Out, it's like the white kid in the movie that kind of becomes a gangster and is part of the family.
Was actually a cousin in the true story.
Yeah,
was a cousin.
I don't remember. Yeah.
And he was a white cousin.
Yeah. I kind of dressed the part. I remember you and Mom would not let me fully go hard into the outfits, but
We wouldn't let you go hardcore.
they didn't let me buy the Nike Cortez. I really wanted them, but like the white t-shirts and the pants, and I definitely had the like Cholo accent down. That's for sure. There's a video of me talking like that, and it's like one of the most embarrassing. Some of you guys have seen it. It's one of the most embarrassing things ever. So
we didn't even notice.
I know. Our family did though. Every time we visited my dad's brother, it's like, man, your kid sounds so Mexican. My dad was like, what are you talking about? And then even as an adult, when I started touring, lots of times people thought I was Mexican all the time. So it was just, yeah.
We'll have to show the
There's a certain
congregation
swagger,
that film.
you know? So.
Is that right, Camp?
Yeah, I'm not bringing it out. It's not happening.
I got it.
It's gone.
I got it. Okay.
The video's gonna pop up again someday. I already know.
But
with them though, lots of them were in the gang, doing a lot of work for the gangs in the neighborhood.
But we did not know that.
No,
Your parents did not know that.
No.
We thought they were, actually, in all fairness to parents, we really came over here totally naive into the Hawaiian Gardens area. We knew that drugs were a problem in the world. We just thought they didn't happen in a person's life until you were in junior high or high school. We were completely wrong. In the city here, they were happening at age 7 and 8. And we just didn't know. And so when we saw these other kids and Ryan wanted to like hang out and they were nice, we just thought, they're older kids, but they'll take care of the little guy. Yeah. So So they did protect you in some ways, but
Yes,
they also
for
led
sure.
you into some pretty dangerous territory throughout your childhood. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I was offered drugs all the time. There was always drugs around. But I knew better than trying drugs. And a lot of that came from seeing, I mean, we worked with a lot of drug addicts. I remember as a kid, people would recover at our house. They would kick heroin at our house. We had people on bad trips come over and beat on our window or our door trying to get help. And so I saw this from being as young as I can remember. So
With your bedroom by the front door.
yeah, my bedroom was the front window, and so I had times where people would wake me up knocking on my window. This guy had like his whole face tatted, and he was like, yo, I need help. And I was like, oh my gosh, like probably 6 or something. That's a weird way to wake up, you know? So I knew that I wanted nothing to do with drugs because I saw how dangerous and damaging they really were, and I was scared of them from seeing all of that at a young age. But they were always around. They were always offered. I did try something once, but it was snuck to me. So because I was white, also everyone always wanted to give me Mexican candy, like it was some new thing. But I grew up here with everybody, so I was like, I know what this is, man. I eat this. But there was always a new Mexican candy coming out somewhere. You know, we had a neighbor at the end of our street. She would go to Mexico and just buy like loads of candy, and she opened the Mexican candy store in her kitchen. And so we would go there and buy stuff all the time. And but yeah, one of my friends, one of the older guys who was a dealer for the neighborhood, I remember being in their backyard, and they were cutting cocaine and bagging it, and I was probably 7 or 8, and I was just hanging out with them in the backyard, and they told me that. I was like, what is that? They're like, oh, it's some new Mexican candy. It's really good. And so they thought it was funny. They gave it to me. They told me to eat some, put it in my mouth. And so when I was a kid, I just remember rubbing it inside of my mouth. And they just thought it was the funniest thing like in the world because I couldn't feel my face. It started going numb. And so that was my cocaine experience. But yeah, there was like a lot of that, you know, like the kind of the funny thing of, it was funny to see the little kid cuss or to see the little kid, you know, try a cigarette or something. It was just,
Or even show you porn.
yeah.
They thought that was
That was
hilarious.
That was weirdly common also, at such a young age as well. You know, like most of these guys, like I said, were probably 14 to 16, something like that. That was probably about the age they were at that time. And so, yeah, they introduced me to a lot of the world at a very early age. Yeah.
And of course, you didn't tell your mom or dad anything
No.
about these things because they would tell you, don't be a tattletale, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, a rat.
a rat.
Yeah.
Oh, they'd say a rat.
But that was another thing. So because I was so young and I wanted to impress them, of course, all the time, like no matter what happened, no matter what was going on, typically I didn't say anything. So I knew I would, you know, I don't remember this, but you guys said that there were like guns around, and I finally said something about that. But
Yeah, you went over to a younger friend's house, but he had older brothers, and
they were showing us their guns.
and he was
stuff.
showing
Yeah.
off his gun, and then you came home really scared, and you said, "Hey, he has a gun. It's a real gun. It's not like a fake gun. It's a real gun."
Yeah. I guess when you see a gun, you're like, that's different. You know.
You didn't ever go over there again.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So,
yeah. I also had a friend whose dad was a runner for the mafia, so we found that out, of course, later, that he was always in Mexico, and I remember playing hide and go seek, and he had all these hiding spots all over
in his car.
in his car. Yeah, he had a really big Suburban with all these spots removed out of them, so we would hide in the car. And found out there was a purpose for all those spots. That's when I tried his house. I know this is in there, but I don't know.
Yeah,
where
actually,
at.
it's the next question.
Oh,
I was
okay,
going to
yeah.
ask you if you ever used drugs or if you ever
Yeah.
drank.
So the cocaine thing happened, but drinking and smoking was like intriguing. You know, there was like not as much fear when it came to that. So that cartel dad's house, me and his son, when he would leave, he would be gone for a long time. And so he always had like multiple bottles of tequila, like he collected tequilas and cigars and stuff. And so my friend was like, hey, let's drink some tequila. We'll have my dad's cigars. And like, we were little kids. And I remember he poured some tequila for me to try, and we were sitting there. We thought we were all cool, you know? And like lit a cigar and just almost died from, I was like, why do people do this? And then tried the tequila, and it felt like gasoline. And I was like, nah, I'm good. And so we stopped. We tried to pretend, you know, to be like the cool kids, but yeah, so.
And then there was that time you smoked all those cigarettes.
Oh, yeah.
That was with the same kid. That kid was all right.
So the cigarettes, we found a brand new pack of cigarettes. There was like a drug house that was a few blocks from our house that was vacant for like a year and a half. And we used to sneak in that house all the time. And like, it was a weird house, but we used to like get light bulbs. I remember like those big fluorescent ones. There was like boxes of those in there. We would throw them from like the roof because they popped really loud. And, but yeah, so we found like a brand new pack of cigarettes. And we were like, oh yeah, we're so cool. So I remember just walking around with cigarettes. Like, we're the coolest, dude. We're just walking with cigarettes, smoking down the street. And then got like yellow, felt sick. I was like, oh, never doing that again.
So this was the pastor's kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, of course, those were times as a child that you experimented. But how about as you got older? And what about your sisters who came into the picture later on?
I can't know for sure with them. You know, I don't know. But I'm not a rat. Yeah, I don't know. But as I got older, I really kind of was just, I started to realize, like, a lot of it was just curiosity and also not really knowing what they were. Like you said, like we had kind of talked about drugs, but I don't think you guys realized that they were around as much at a young age.
For your age, yeah, we didn't.
But yeah, I was offered a lot. They were around a lot, and I never knowingly took any kind of drug. And besides that one experience, that was kind of a prank. But yeah, I had, and I think the other thing is there was this program in school.
Ernie Vargas.
With Ernie Vargas. You guys know Ernie, he's in the city council now, but he had this program that was for like drug and gang prevention, and they would come to the schools and they would kind of just educate people. And I remember that was probably in like 4th grade or something like that, where they came to our school. And all of a sudden, like all of these flags kind of turned on in my head while I was sitting in there. All of the signs of gang members and all of the signs of drug use and, you know, people selling drugs and violence. And I was sitting there just thinking, like, I know all these people. Like, I just sat in there like, that's all of the people I hang out with. Those are all the friends from my street. Like, this is pretty wild. But I mean, our street also, you know, 224th is where I grew up. And that street at that time, like in the 90s, was probably one of the most popular streets in the whole neighborhood for being the street where everyone got their drugs from. There was a lot of drug houses on our street. Yeah.
Well, thank God there was a God
Yes.
who your mom and I were praying to all the time, because he knew what was going on, even though we didn't know everything that was going on. It says in Psalm 121, 5 through 8, it says, the Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day or the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and your going, both now and forevermore. And that was always the prayer that Terrell and I would be praying for you kids, was, God, you know, I know we live here and I know you called us here, but watch over our kids, protect our kids. And it appears that he was doing that the whole time as we look back. And even using Ernie to put that program in the schools. And then there was I think that was the time that the Just Say No came out in the federal government. That helped out too.
Yeah, they really started teaching us a lot in elementary about the dangers of drugs and the risk of them. So, because before, like I said, it wasn't talked about enough to realize how bad it could be. And I think even thinking about it now, like with the fentanyl thing and all of that stuff that's been going on, like how much the danger has even increased from what it was, you know, when I was a kid. Like now that little prank could have like easily
killed
me.
you.
Yeah,
that would have
100%.
killed you. If that was fentanyl, you'd be dead.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, it's no joke, really. So if you're a young person and you're listening to this, you know, I know there's a lot of pressure not to be a rat, but find somebody trustworthy. Now, if Ryan happened to be your youth pastor, that would be a trustworthy source, right? The Way Out Ministry is talking to people here. Tell somebody, let somebody know, so that we can get the help that you need to get. And if you're using drugs, if you're on drugs, there's always a pathway off and out of drugs. It may seem like you're addicted and you can't stop, but there's always hope. There always is, and there's always many people that have already gone through that path and have gotten the help and have changed. Even right in this church there is. You know, you look around the church at people around you and you say, hey, who's the drug addict in here? Well, you can't really tell who has gone through that and has overcome it. But you'd be quite surprised in our church if I start asking people of past sins to please stand up. There wouldn't be very many seats left at the end that you know, people are sitting down. Yeah, so please, you know, contact us. There's a lot of little kids using dope today. You know, and of course, if little kids are using dope, that's definitely a parent's fault, probably. I mean, I know now, Terrell and I have become much more streetwise over the years. We have talked with kids who were 8, 9 years old, and they were smoking pot with their parents in the living room, just hanging out. You know, I mean, this is, if a kid is raised like that, then how is that kid not going to be an addict? So, you know, please, you know, take heed, and if you see something, say something. You just got to say something to the right people. So did you ever have encounters with the police growing up? Let's just go full on here.
So the cops lived on our street, I feel like, especially those certain houses. You know, there were raids all the time. There was a lot of activity, police activity down our block. But I remember most of my police experience was kind of just like regular childhood mischief. But we used to have our own police department in Hawaiian Gardens for that time when I was a kid also. And so they kind of knew the kids in their neighborhood, and a lot of times they even had some fun with us, like kind of messing with us and picking on us a little bit. And so we used to sneak into Hawaiian Elementary all the time. We had the fence cut at the bottom, and so me and a bunch of friends would go over there, and we would lift the fence and like run around and have fun there, and sometimes go play baseball, whatever. And so all of a sudden one day they realized that we were constantly going in there, so they fixed the fence. We couldn't get in. And the fence over there, if you guys have seen it, it's a pretty high fence. It's always been that high. I don't know how high it is. To me, it still looks like 50 feet because of my experience. But the fence, right, was there. And so, of course, all the older guys are like, oh, he's not a thug. He can't jump the fence. He can't jump the fence. And I was always trying to prove myself. So like, I'll jump the fence. And so I climbed the fence, and I got all the way to the top, and I had like a panic moment. I'm afraid of heights. I still am. I got up there, and I just froze. Everybody else was already running, and they thought it was hilarious. Or they were laughing and pointing at me on the other side. Oh, I told you can't get up a fence, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm up there, and all of a sudden, 2 cop cars pull up, and they throw their sirens on, and all my friends leave me. They all just take off into Hawaiian Elementary, and I'm stuck at the top of the fence, and the cops are on the loudspeaker. Excuse me, sir, you're gonna have to get down from that fence. And they're just talking to me, and it was like so embarrassing. And I remember I hooked my pants because I was trying to get over to run away. And I hooked my pants, and they tore. And I finally got over the fence and then took off with everybody else. With the cops, I think were just cracking up, having a good time. And then there was one night where you guys were gone.
Yeah, somebody was nice enough to send us to Hawaii.
Yeah, they didn't send me though.
Couldn't pass that up, so we left Ryan and the girls with Deborah, who was like an older sister.
Yeah, you guys kind of somewhat adopted her in a sense for a few years.
And so she was in charge.
She was in charge, yeah. that was fun. We had a giant sleepover. I think almost every kid stayed at my house for that weekend. And I think she asked if kids could stay the night. I remember her like talking to mom. It's not like she was being a rule breaker, but she asked if they could stay. And there was probably more than we had talked about, but we had a
Old house
sleepover.
party.
Yeah, we were just being kids, but we all planned to toilet paper the whole street. And we were like, we're gonna toilet paper from that corner all the way to this side. Like we're gonna do the whole street. And so we all had like massive amounts of toilet paper. We made like spit wads that were like this big out of buckets of water and just went everywhere and like just destroyed the whole street with toilet paper. And the cops got called. Someone saw us. They called the cops. They saw, 30 kids run into the house or whatever. There was a lot of us, but they saw everyone run into my house. And so the cops were called. They showed up and they lit our whole house up with the spotlights, which was, as a kid, it was like I felt like I was in a Marvel movie, like the whole house lit up bright white. If you ever had one of those on your house, like they're another level of bright. And so I remember we were like army crawling through the living room, trying to go hide in the back, like we were sleeping, and the cops came to the door and they made us walk the street at like 2 a.m. and take everything down and clean everything up.
So
we
how
cleaned
about
the whole-
Deborah? What happened to her?
Deborah said, I told you guys that if anyone got caught, that I was sleeping and I didn't know about it. So she came to the door and was like, oh, hello? And she was like, I don't know what happened. Oh, these kids, they must have snuck out. And then she just went into the back and she was kind of laughing at us later because they made us clean everything up. But it was pretty embarrassing. But yeah, nothing ever real, but those were the two police
And meanwhile, back at the
experiences.
luau.
Yeah. Yeah.
But of course, later on, after the gang injunction happened in Hawaiian Gardens, you had a different kind of an experience with the police when you went to Magic Mountain.
Yeah, so long story short, basically going back to my friends and all that early time is there ended up being a huge racial war. I mean, it was like an all-on war, which I don't think we wrote that much about it in there.
Yeah, and you had a lot of black friends that ended up leaving the neighborhood. And
all of my friends that were black ended up leaving the neighborhood. I had one friend's house who had like a cocktail bomb thrown in his window. Another friend's uncle was shot to death in the middle of the street. It got really, really bad. So that was like a really hard time as a kid as well. There was a lot of fear that was starting to set in, seeing all my friends leave. And then the other guys on my street were the problem. The ones that were the older ones. I remember there was an article done from the New York Times. Was it the New York Times? Or I think it was.
I don't know.
Hawaiian Gardens was like considered the highest hate crime place like in the U.S. at that time. Like there was more per capita than anywhere.
Hawaiian Gardens, has the reputation still to this day for having the largest gang raid in the history of the United States per capita. So we eventually, after that horrible incident where there was such a racial explosion of hate, then the police presence increased in Hawaiian Gardens. And then a police officer was also shot and killed here. Mm-hmm. And that is when everything completely changed, and the pressure from society and the pressure from politicians and came down, and the police department got really hardcore and started overreacting.
And that was when the Hawaiian Gardens department had already been out. So that's when Lakewood Sheriff started taking over.
And so we were known then as a cop killer city, and HG now stood for hate gang, and was a racially violent gang. So
So during that time, they all left, but there was a write-up, and I remember specifically 2 of the guys from my street that I looked up to, the 2 that actually gave me the cocaine, were interviewed. You had this paper, I think, still in your office somewhere.
I still have a lot of those
But
papers.
2 of them, I remember my dad was really upset. My mom was crying when she read it. She was just super upset, and they had it like put away somewhere. And I remember taking it and reading it. I didn't think I was gonna get weird.
Oh, look.
But like just seeing the amount of hate, like racial hate, it was bad.
Yeah, because those were your friends, and they were, even though they were messed up, they were good to you, and then to see somebody that has goodness in them become so evil and hateful in an interview like that.
Yeah, it was bad.
It really is crushing. Yeah, it is.
So then, after all of the hate, violence stuff happened, like really, there was really like no black people left. Like every single person I knew that was black, just they left. And so, luckily, it's not like that anymore. I don't see that nearly as much here at all. I'm sure there's still some deep racial tension from those, during the 90s that's still kind of there, but all of that stuff kind of slowed down. And I actually remember when we talked about like the violence and stuff like that and kind of getting scared. I remember one time we were in our ministry van and there was probably 20 gang members in the street. We used to have dances and parties here. And so we had a dance, and we would have these big dances, and then we would all get dropped off in, my mom's massive van. That was also my ride to school every day. But,
oh man, now looking back, poor kid.
Oh yeah, everyone.
I just want you to know we would never do that.
No,
to
of
you
course
today,
not. No. But I remember getting picked up, and they'd be like, "The short bus is here, Ryan. Come get in your car." But we were in that van, and there was about like 20 gang members at that time, and they had chains and bats and like brass knuckles, guns, knives, and they were literally just checking cars to see if there were black people in them. Like that's how violent it was. And my black friend was actually in the car, and so luckily we prayed, and they let us through and realized that it was my mom. And we were kind of already known in the neighborhood for being there for people, so they saw her and she was like, "What are you doing out here?" And like just like put them on blast. It was like being a mom to like the gang members that were in the street. And they were like, "Oh, just let her through." And so we dropped off my friend. But yeah, it was a hard time. So later, after the officer shooting, I was already youth pastoring kind of at the time, and then that got really bad the opposite way. So there's this quote from this group that I love. I don't need to say their name. They're not Christians, so I won't say it. But that was also part of my childhood. I was listening to lots of hip-hop music. But there's this quote, and it says, "The neighborhood watch is when you watch for criminals and watch for cops." And so, like, that was kind of the attitude of the neighborhood. It was like, hey, if a cop comes, you tell us. And if someone is looking shady, also you tell us. But, and the cops it got really bad here. When I was working with the kids, there were kids being put on the injunction at like 12 years old that I worked with. And I was like, oh, this kid's a gang member now. He can't hang out with his friend. He can't ride a bike anymore because he's a gangster, because he has a buzzed head, and like, so it got really, really bad. I remember getting pulled over. I think Lucas might have been in the car. George was in the car at Magic Mountain, and I had my radio on blasting, and we were in the parking lot, got pulled over, and the cop that pulled us over at Magic Mountain, right? This is pretty far away.
Yeah.
We're not
Valencia.
But the neighborhood became famous for being a cop killing neighborhood. And so I remember getting pulled over, and the guy was like, "Oh, give me your driver's license, blah, blah, blah." The cop took all of it, and he was like, "Oh, you're from that cop killer neighborhood, huh?" And he was like, "What a bunch of losers." And like, this is me as a youth pastor with kids from my youth group from that neighborhood, and I just remember, oh man, I mouthed off a little bit and got a ticket for like 5 things on my car. And I went to court because I was so mad about it, and the judge was like, "This cop was clearly a jerk. Like, these are ridiculous tickets. Like, this isn't even a real thing." So he threw it out. But yeah, that became the new thing. I got pulled over all the time just because they would run my plate and it said Hawaiian Gardens. I would just get pulled over. It was like constant all the time. My car probably drew too much attention at that time too.
Yeah, it was a little
Yeah, it was stupid.
racy car.
Don't paint your car, throw rims on it, get a sound system, and waste all your money so you can get pulled over more. It's not worth it. But yeah.
Well, they don't pull them over anymore.
No, that's true.
Maybe now it will happen to be like that again. But so things really changed from a police department that was very friendly and caring, and I remember they used to ride their bikes around in the neighborhood even, and they would give kids pogs, little game disc that they could play with and stuff. Yeah. But then, of course, that radically changed. The police department closed in Hawaiian Gardens. Lakewood sheriffs took over, and then all this stuff happened, and then they decided we're going to throw out a net called the gang injunction, and it caught sharks. Of course, it did catch the sharks, but it also caught a few dolphins in the net as well, and that was the really tragic part of it. Yeah. Later on, I would become a council member because of that, and then eventually the mayor in the city. And now, when we look at the police relationship in Hawaiian Gardens, so much better things.
Nothing's perfect.
Yeah, but nothing's perfect ever. Yeah. So
there's always going to be people, and people.
So back to you. We always saw you as a leader as you were growing up. You were always hanging around older people, and so, you were like way beyond your age, and even older kids seemed to follow you around. Were you as confident as you appeared?
I was a little arrogant, but no, I wasn't. I wasn't not confident, but I was still trying to always fit in and be somebody,
I mean, you even had a girlfriend who was
4 years older than me.
4 years older than you. And when you split up, she went after a 21-year-old. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I was in 6th grade and she was, I don't know, a freshman in high school or something like that. Holla.
And I thought, wow, what a cool kid I have.
Yeah. It was a heartbreak. I dated her for like 2 years, and then the next boyfriend she had a car and a truck and a job. And I was like, oh, I see how it is. It's rough, It's hard out here for a 7th grader,
So what were some of the difficult, you were involved here in this ministry all the time, and it's so funny that you talk about getting dropped off in a ministry van at your school, and then the ministry van's driving through the neighborhood. I mean, I remember driving that van through the neighborhood, and we would see people with drinking beer, and all of a sudden they'd put their beer behind their back and wave at us. There was a great intimidation with that. It
said the Way Out Ministries on the side, all big with the phone number, and it said "Taking Hope to the Streets."
It did.
Oh man, that's great. All right. Yeah.
So, but we just didn't even think about how painful that might be for a child. There were other things we didn't either. You were involved here in the ministry a lot, and you took leadership roles in a lot of different things. What were some of the things that you can recall in ministry that were difficult for you, but you did them anyway?
Where to begin? No, there was. I mean, I was always involved. Always did things. I mean, there were definitely some things that I didn't want to do.
How about Mask of the Great Deceiver?
Yeah, that was the one I did. So my parents, right? They were white, and they were raised white, and they had white ideas of ministry sometimes, and this was a real white idea.
But it was very effective.
Was it?
Yes, even though it was white.
Was it though? I don't know. I mean, you could minister with anything, as long as you're bringing Jesus, it never returns. It's never in vain. But yeah, that one was rough. So they had this. They were like, we're doing this ministry, this dance ministry. And you're like, oh, that's cool, hip-hop dance, maybe, break dancing. No, it wasn't that. It was like almost like a ballet. Yeah. And they even had like these silky outfits. And you had to wear a mask. And they were like, "Oh, you're gonna be in it, right?" And I was like, "I don't want to do it. I don't want to be in that." And they're like, "You gotta do it. You gotta do it."
Because you were a good actor.
Yeah, I guess. And so I was like, okay. This was like in junior high, I think, or high school. Yeah. Tell me about it. I think it was like high school. And I specifically remember being like, why do the outfits have to be like that though? Can't we just wear like the mask and normal clothes? Like, no, it looks great on stage. And so I remember anyway, like I was like, I'm gonna be the devil then, because the devil's the only character that doesn't take his mask off. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna be the devil. I'm not taking a mask off. No one needs to see my face. Wherever we do this, I just stay masked up the whole time. So anyway, but yeah, there were definitely some things where I was like, but there was also a lot of fun stuff.
We even took that drama to Michigan.
Yeah, to the white neighborhood. They loved it in Michigan. Yeah. But yeah, it was fun though.
There was Jungle Jive.
Yeah.
That was another thing that you wore a mask.
I did. I wore a mask a lot. I made sure that I was masked up. But there was a lot of fun. I actually had fun acting in a lot of the stuff. We did like lots of dramas here and plays and skits and stuff like that when we were younger. And music was always like a big part of stuff too, playing in bands and doing all that. So it was a lot of fun. I actually got really into acting for a while and started doing some fun stuff with that. So
you actually ended up with an agent in Hollywood, actually.
I know.
And it's so funny because when I see comedies that come out and they make fun of the agents, it's always like
she
your
was
agent.
100% like that. Have you guys seen Friends? Remember Joey's agent? And Friends, like she was exactly like that. Exactly like that. It was pretty wild.
And actually, when you were in high school, you actually got a job in Australia that they wanted to send you to, and of course, it was your senior year, and you rejected that job.
Yeah.
And your agent
fired me.
Cussed you out and fired you.
Yeah, she did.
And that was the end of your acting career.
Yeah. It was going to be a pretty serious money maker for her.
Yeah.
It would have been for me too, but it just wasn't.
Yeah, I mean Rachel was also involved in acting for a while too. I guess when you went out, she went out, everything ended right there. Yeah. All right. If you're watching Deborah Manners, I just want you to know that this is the guy now.
Still did something with
All
my
right.
life.
So you also spoke at a lot of churches for us.
Yep.
I remember one time there was a man that you came to me kind of distraught in Iowa after a service that you had spoke at because a man had insulted you because you didn't tuck in your shirt.
Yeah, I was a 7th grader or something like that. I spoke at the church in front of all these people, and a guy had the nerve to come up to me and say, "You did a fine job, young man, but I would respect you if you tucked in your shirt the next time." I was like, okay. And he was serious.
But all those things built confidence in you, even though some of them were really humiliating.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You had so many experiences growing up that forced you into
uncomfortable
situations,
yeah,
and it helped you to be able to stand up really more for who you were. Actually, Scripture encourages us to walk in faith and to step out and do the Lord's work. 2 Timothy 1:6 calls us to fan into the flames that the gifts that God gives us. And verse 7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of timidity or fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind." So even though, parental mistakes and all, God was working in you. God was building you. God was fanning your gifts into flame. God was
for sure
directing you the whole time. As we look back, we can see that. Were there some times in your teen years that really brought you real fear that made you cry out to God?
In the teen years, I think there was just a lot of deep-seated fear just from being young and seeing so many things. I mean, my mom was also held up at gunpoint when I was young. Our house was broken into 2 different times. Our van was stolen. Those break-ins were through my window in my bedroom also, by the way. Saw drive-bys when I was a kid. There was a lot of violent
girl
fights.
fight.
Yeah, I remember there was a fight when I was probably 5th or 6th grade, somewhere around there, and this girl was seeing red. I mean, it was bad. She was smashing a girl's head into a car multiple times. The girl was completely unconscious.
And that girl was always nice to you.
She was super
a
nice
friend,
to me,
yeah.
but everyone in the neighborhood knew she was not someone to mess with. But yeah, she, and then I remember specifically her putting the girl's head on the curb and her mom running out and like grabbing her. She started fighting off her mom. And then finally, like, it settled down. But I think 100% if her mom didn't come out, I would have seen somebody get killed. 100%, yeah. So, I mean, there was just a lot of that kind of stuff going around. So there was always kind of like this like fear and like uncomfortable kind of feeling when it came to that kind of stuff. But through all of that, though, I started realizing as I got older, like, I've been in a lot of really uncomfortable, scary situations, but God has always, like, kept us safe. As wild as that seemed, like, it seemed wild to me my mom was held up. It seemed wild to me that our van got stopped. The possessed girls at the other one in there.
Oh, yeah.
That was a crazy
Yeah, I remember you
situation.
and Freddie were in the van when that happened. And,
Yeah.
And
that was my first time seeing some real, like, spiritual, like, separate from, I think all of it's spiritual, to be honest. Like, I think violence, drugs, all of that has a spiritual element. It's all sin. It all comes from the devil trying to really trick people into thinking that something's important that's not. But that was the first time I had like a real, I think, like spiritual experience that was outside of those, which we saw this lady in the street. And because my mom is my mom, this lady was like literally like just clawing at the pavement. And I was like, oh my gosh. And my mom pulled up and like stopped the car because she was in the middle of the road doing that. And I was like, I'm going to check on this lady. And me and my friend are in the car like, no, let's just go around her. We don't need, it was like 1 a.m. It was after another one of those dances, I think, or like some late night at church. And we're like, nah, just go. Like, we don't. And she's like, I'm going to just check on her. And so me and my friend were like, oh, we can't let her go out by herself, like this is weird. So we go out with her, and the lady was like speaking not any language I've heard before and kind of grumbling, and she sounded weird. And my mom said, hey, can we pray for you? And she kind of kept like getting away from us. She didn't want prayer, but there was something wrong, like very wrong with her. And my mom was trying to convince her to get in the van. And I was like, can we go? I remember just pleading with mom, like, let's go. We don't need to put her in the van. I've said this multiple times, by the way, to my mom. Don't put him in the car. Like, we're good. And so anyway, she convinced her to get in the van. She's like, I think you need some help. We're going to take you, get you some medical help, and maybe we could take you to the hospital. She kept saying that these people were chasing her, that these beings were trying to get her. Anyway, she gets in the van.
So we were taking her to a
hospital.
To a hospital.
Yes,
Yeah.
because she was bleeding. Her fingers were bleeding from scratching the ground, and she was all beat up. Like, she looked like she got jumped, but she was by herself, and she clearly did it to herself.
And while we were driving there, we turned on some worship music to calm her down.
My mom, I think if we put on some worship, that'll make things better. But I remember she put the worship music on. The lady was sitting in the front row, and she put it on, and she covered her ears and started screaming, and then laid on the floor of the van, like, and was trying to like cover her head, and she was like, turn that off. And started really freaking out. And so my mom was like, oh, I mean, I could change it. She put on like, some other Christian album or song. And she just kept screaming, like, turn that off. She's just kind of saying some weird things Christian-wise, like, that are, you don't want to hear. And it was clearly like a demonic thing. She jumped out of the van while it was driving. She just threw the doors open, the double doors, and she just jumped out while we were going like 30, 40 miles an hour on like a street. And my mom, of course, pulled over because we got to save her. I was like, let her go, Mom. And she jumped out, like we pulled over, my mom gets out of the car, so I'm like, all right, here we go again. So we get out, and like the lady was just gone. Like we couldn't.
Yeah, gone.
Like just jumped out, and she was just gone. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. It was a weird night. It was wild. So yeah, that was a scary moment, but once again, the Lord was always keeping everyone safe, and
there was a time where so many of your friends were getting messed up. So many of them were joining gangs. I mean, it was really tragic. We were here working with the kids for a few years, and then they were joining gangs. They were getting jumped in, and so we ask you, Ryan. Look, your mom and I have been really thinking about this, and we think we should move. As a matter of fact, we had already gotten a realtor, and we were looking at houses. We were going to sell our house and move somewhere else. We were planning on commuting to the ministry, but moving away because it was just too hard to live in the city. And we approached you with that idea, and you said that, well, where would the people go that need help? And then our realtor died, so
The Lord
we
stopped
stayed.
that. Yeah.
But your heart was really for the city even then when you were younger. But you did want to get out of Hawaiian Garden schools when you knew there was about time for you to go to Killingsworth Junior High School. You really didn't want to do that.
And that was very much still too at the like peak of the racial tension at that time. It was still pretty bad. There was like riots at the schools all the time. There would just be massive brawls, like huge fights in the middle of the grass.
And so you begged us, homeschool me.
Yeah.
I just don't want to go there.
I did not want to go there.
Around that same time, we had started a school, and so you came to the Way Out Ministries Christian Academy, and you went to school here for junior
Lots
high
of people
and
went
high
to school
school.
here. Delilah
Yeah.
went to school here. Lucas. Who else is in here? Anybody else? Turner High, where you at? Come on, let me see. Yeah.
And of course, so it started out as the Way Out Ministries Christian Academy, and then we got a principal that used to be actually one of Terrell's old teachers at La Salle High School, Terry Turner. Terry Turner came here and began being the principal, and then he was tragically killed in an automobile accident, and so we renamed the school Turner High School. In that school actively had 70 students in the time that it ran, and graduated 70 students, I should say, from senior high school, and 17 years. But we eventually disbanded the school because it became too expensive and too difficult in California to have a private school. Too many regulations. But you got through school here.
Yep.
And that turned out to be a great thing, and a lot of people were able to graduate here. So while you were at this school, you had some interesting experiences. You of course, received your general education here, but you also deep dived into Christian studies because it was a Christian school. You took theology classes and different things. You also participated in the theater, surfing.
Surfing was fun.
Yeah, surfing, and music, of course. In fact, you started two bands when you were in the school, Metamorphosis and Ethics. You also rejected that acting job that would have sent you to Australia. But music...
I still want to go to Australia.
Music, of course, was your passion. So the bands you started in school were heavy metal, pop punk. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
My
was where it was
pastor's
at.
son kid. And then reggae became your favorite style of music. These are like strange choices of music for a pastor's kid, right?
And I only listened to hip hop as a child, which is what's also weird.
How did...
And Fleetwood Mac, if it was on.
that was your mom.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So...
Shania Twain was on every once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did we as parents deal with your interests?
You guys were always super supportive. There was always like a lot of communication. I remember you guys paid somehow, even though we were typically broke, like figured out how to get enough money so that we could record in a studio. Our band was able to do like a recording and do an album. Kind of became good friends after doing that album with the studio owner. And then he started giving me studio time if I would record on other artist stuff. So he would say, hey, if you want to record drums, on this song. Like, I'll give you 8 hours of studio time. And so we started kind of trading job for job. And that was, when I was about 17 or 18. So I started getting very into music.
So you even wrote your high school thesis on reggae,
Yeah.
right? Or was it on?
It was on
reggae, yeah.
Rastafarianism and reggae, yeah.
Yeah. And you studied it quite in depth, and you had a favorite Christian group. Who was that?
So there was this group called Christafari, and they were kind of like almost like the creators of Christian reggae. There wasn't very much of it, but they were this really good band that had been around for a long time and did it kind of, I think, better than anybody when it came to the Christian genre for sure. And they created a label, had lots of different artists from all over the world that ended up being on that label.
Yeah, they've been around for years, right?
I mean, the first album that they put out, I think I was just born. It was like in the 80s. Yeah.
And so you were into reggae music, you loved Christafari, and you graduated from high school. You went to Calvary Chapel School of Music for a while.
Started a band there with a couple guys.
Oh yeah, you did. What band was that?
That was Four on the Floor.
Oh, that was Four on the Floor.
That's where
right.
we all met. Yep.
So then you, during that time, you also started teaching youth group here, and had another girlfriend. You always had girlfriends.
Yeah.
So Dominic, a friend of yours.
That's Fraser's brother.
Yeah, that's right. Fraser's brother.
Yeah, some of you guys have met him.
So Dominic started helping you with the youth group. You told me that I was too old to teach youth.
Yeah, I did. I said that. I'm sorry.
And so I thought, hey,
That's what
okay.
David told me last week, too. He said, Ryan, you're too old, man.
Who told you that?
No, I'm just kidding. Not yet. It's coming. It's coming.
Is coming.
Because my
you're getting
son,
closer to the age
my
that I
son
was.
started in 9th grade, and I told you when I was like a senior, I think. Junior, maybe?
Yeah.
It's like, you're too old for this.
So he wanted to start teaching. So I said, that's cool, but I was thinking, I'll go with you. You'll teach. And he agreed. Yeah, I'd like to teach. Dominic and I would like to start doing that in youth group. So I said, you want me to be with you a few times and then kind of let you go? He goes, no, I don't want you there. So I didn't go. I just let him go, and he kept doing it, and he would report to me, and the group was growing, and they seemed to enjoy it. So Dominic and you taught, and then of course Dominic bailed.
Eventually, yeah. I don't remember how, but he had a girlfriend too.
And then he left you alone, right?
Yeah, I started doing it by myself.
So you got to see what ministry's really like. Yeah, sometimes it's lonely.
Yeah.
So, but you kind of got to a place of conflict there because you were dating this girl who really wasn't such a great girl, and then you were teaching youth at the same time.
Yeah.
So when did that come to a head and make you really realize that, hey, you had to make some strong, firm choices?
Yeah, it was probably like right when high school was over, but yeah, I was dating somebody on and off. I was, like he said, I always had a girlfriend. I think I had a problem with that. That's a whole nother story, but yeah, I think so. I was teaching, and there was one time was that relationship kind of finally ended. I had called this girl and told her, hey, I'm gonna come by and visit, or maybe we can go somewhere. And she told me she was babysitting, so she couldn't go out anywhere. So then I thought, like, I'll just surprise her. I'll take her, like, food or whatever to her house. And so I went to the house and showed up with some food to find out that, like, there was a house party going on. And so I got there, and there was people smoking in the front yard. There was drinks everywhere. And, like, most of the kids that were there were my youth kids. And so, mind you,
Welcome to the ministry.
Yeah. And of course, like, you need to remember, I was basically a high school kid teaching high school kids. So it's not, we're not talking the same kind of thing. But I probably started teaching too young, to be honest. You should have probably kept it going a little longer. I told you were too old, but the reality was I was too young. There was a lot.
We thought you were so mature.
Yeah. Wrong. So yeah, that was a major wake up call, and I kind of remember driving and just being like, man, I just got played, you know, and I was like mad at God about it, like.
So the baby was even crying in the.
Yeah.
She was babysitting. So she didn't
Well,
lie.
no, the sister was there too,
Oh, I
and
see.
so was the baby, but the baby was not being watched by anybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I remember that was upsetting to me. So it was a bad day, and I remember kind of feeling like remember saying that, like, really, like I'm getting played right now, like, come on, dude, like it's supposed to be the other way around. That was like my attitude, you know. But then I kind of just felt God tell me, like, are you playing me? And I was like, oh, okay, I see you. And I just kind of had this real moment of just feeling like, kind of like, I'm too young, I'm a hypocrite, like, how am I doing this, you know? And so it was a wake-up call for sure, and that's kind of one of those moments where I was like, all right, I gotta change something, and really, either I'm in this or I'm not in this. So
There's a passage that comes to mind in Psalm 1:6. It says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person will be like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, whose leaf does not wither, and in whatever they do they prosper. But not so the wicked. They're like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction." So you began to think deeply about your walk with the Lord and getting more serious about it. This strengthened your commitment to the Lord then, didn't it?
yeah, for sure.
So after that breakup, you dated some other girls, broke some hearts, and finally found your lifelong love at your job that you had at Starbucks. You were still teaching the youth at the Way Out Ministries, playing worship for our church. And then you eventually proposed to Leslie.
Pretty quick.
Yeah, it was
Pretty
quick.
quick. When you know, you know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we were just so thankful as parents that the
It
previous
didn't work out.
relationship ended. And then it wasn't long after, and then here he's coming home going, "I met this girl." And
That's a whole nother story.
you proposed to her,
Yeah.
but at the same time you got another proposal. What was that
So-
proposal?
Because we're running out of time, I'm going to try to say it as fast as
Yeah.
possible. I was in this band that I started in that college. We actually had a show here, and I was actually able to get Christafari's booking information. So I actually planned a youth event, young adults, whatever, event here for a concert, and I booked Christafari, and I was super excited. I was like, oh man, like they're going to play at our church. This is really cool. So we had this concert outside. Actually, no, that one was in here. So we had a concert in here, and it was packed. I mean, like, it was all the way packed in here, which was super fun. And my band that I had started with those other two guys opened that concert. And then we opened for them, and the lead singer for Christafari was in here watching us. And then he talked to me after and said, "Hey, you're a really solid drummer, and we need somebody." And so he was like, "If you want to audition in a week, I would love for you to try out for the band, for the spot." And so I tried out, learned, I think, like 4 of their songs in like a week, just worked as hard as I could, and then did the audition and immediately got the job.
And so you got married to Leslie, and then a week later.
Yeah, we got married, had our honeymoon, and then literally the day we got home from our honeymoon, we had to repack because I started touring.
Yeah, so you went to
Europe for a month.
I remember Leslie came home after 2 weeks. She was kissing the earth. She said she hated touring.
It was the only time she ever did it.
She said, "I'll never do it again." She was good for that.
She was good for that. That was the truth. She never
But
did
you
it again.
loved it.
Yeah.
You even had vivid dreams of touring with a band all throughout high school.
Yeah.
So you had like a deja vu in Brazil.
Yep.
What happened there?
Yeah, I had this reoccurring dream all the time when I was in high school, where I dreamed that there was like this guy with dreadlocks in front of me, and there was just thousands of people, and I had a drum kit, and so it happened all the time, and it was one of those dreams where you're like, I don't want to wake up, dang it, I was having a good time, you know. And so I had that dream all the time, and then all of a sudden, one of our shows, we were performing, and there was like 80,000 people at a soccer stadium in Brazil during Carnival, and the thing too about this band is reggae is a world music, right? And so it's way bigger out of the country than they've ever been here. So every time we went out of the country, I mean, there were some really massive shows.
You'd get swamped at the airport.
Yeah, you'd get
Felt
stopped
like
at
the
the
Beatles
airport.
or something.
Yeah, it kind of did. It sounds foolish. It gets almost embarrassing. But yeah, it did feel like that. Like we would sign autographs for like hours after the concerts were over. So it was like real touring, you know. And I remember that show, I was freaking out because they told us there was going to be a lot of people, but that was definitely the biggest crowd that I ever played in front of. And I remember hearing like 80,000 people chanting in Portuguese for us to come out, and I was like, oh man. And I had only probably been in the band for, I don't know, a couple months. Like I was still the new guy on the stage, and I was like, oh my gosh. And so, but then when we went out there and the lights all came up, like it was exactly my dream. Like, and I freaked out. I remember being up there just like, oh my gosh. And it was kind of, I told my dad, like, it was like God was flexing on me. He was like, you know, I told you. I told you it's possible. So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
But you did a lot of concerts with Christ Safari, and you recorded an album with the band, but there was some kind of a unfulfillment that was still going on in you. You missed home, you missed youth group.
And touring is hard. It is not easy. It's not easy at all. Yeah.
So eventually you quit Christafari.
I quit Christafari and then ended up joining a different artist because almost all of the touring we were doing was international. And so I was really tired of doing international touring, and I wanted to do something more local. And so I started playing with a different artist who was based out of Santa Barbara, and we did a lot more local stuff. Kind of all like along the coast was the idea. And then he ended up getting an international contract, and then I was back
doing touring
all
again.
over the world again.
That
and
was
I was like,
Dominic Bali.
I did not want to do this again. So you might be thinking like, that's crazy. You don't want to go all over the world. It's a lot of work, everybody. It's not easy. So
yeah. Leslie came back from the European thing, and she said, "Alls I got to do was see Big Ben. That was it. The rest of my time was behind stages and green rooms, and she was not having it."
Yeah.
So when did you finally call it quits in professional music, and why did you do that?
I finally quit completely when Joey was probably like 2 years old. That's what my wife says. It was around then. I just kind of kept feeling called out of it. The Lord just kind of kept telling me, like there was this major sense of being unsatisfied, even though it was something I wanted to do my whole life. Every time I was doing it, I felt like, why am I doing this? And so touring, being away from my wife, from my son, and then also being away from the ministry was definitely a big part of it. I felt like I would build relationships with the youth here, and then I would leave for a month. And then I would come back, and it was like nothing had happened, and I would have to start all over again. And so God just kind of kept telling me, that this is a neighborhood where people quit on people all the time, and that's kind of what I felt like. I just felt like I kept quitting for like my own purpose. Like, this is what I want to do, so you guys can wait. Like, that's kind of what I kept feeling like was going on. So God kept calling me out, and it was pretty obvious, even directly from like words of pastors, from reading my word. I knew I was supposed to quit, but it was fun.
Yeah.
And
you made money.
I got paid. I got to travel the world, and so it became very selfish. I pretended like it was about the Lord and ministry, but it was really about me.
Did that fame have anything to do with it at all?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like, I would be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. Like, it felt good to sign autographs and take pictures.
So it came down to a place where Dominic Bali, who you were performing with at that time, made you an offer to go on another tour.
Yep. So I got another offer, and it was going to be, I think, something like a 3-month tour. something like that. We were doing a new album, and the request is to go on like a tour that was going to be 3 months, and then we would be home for a couple weeks, and then we would go for maybe another 2 months. And the way touring works, the longer you tour, the more money you make, because you got to pay for everything in between. So if you start making money in the beginning of the tour, it's very little, but then the longer you stay, the more money you start to make. So the plan was to go on like a longer tour so that we could get paid really well and the album could really get pushed. And so it was going to be a very long tour, but it was also going to pay very well. And my wife and I at that time, we were still living at my grandma's house because I was touring. She was trying to raise our kid. And so there was definitely no money. Like, we were pretty broke with the ministry stuff and just trying to tour. And so we had wanted a house for a long time. And I remember that the offer was basically going to be enough for like a down payment on a house. And so I was really excited, but knew I wasn't supposed to go. And so I called my wife thinking, well, she wants a house too. Maybe she'll tell me like, hey, this is it. After this one, we'll call it quits. Like, that's going to be nice, to have that in the bank. So we were recording the album. I told him I needed to pray about it, but I already knew the answer without even praying. I knew like I'm supposed to say no. And I remember calling my wife and telling her, hey, so, Dom wants me to go on this really long tour, blah, blah, blah. And, it would pay a lot, like more than we've ever gotten. Like, it's going to be really good for us financially. And then, she asked if I prayed about it. And I was like, well, yeah, I prayed about it. She's like, well, what did the Lord say? And I was like, he told me to quit. And I remember she was just like, then why did you call me? Go quit. She doesn't even remember that, but that's what she said it with like an attitude too. My wife is. I was like, all right, whoa, take it easy. So I just went in and I was like, I'm quitting.
So you did sign.
Ministry.
So you did quit, and then you ended up signing with the Way Out Ministry, so to speak.
Yeah.
How did that go?
Contract was smaller.
How did that go?
So that my whole thing. I'm sorry, everybody. This is a lot to talk up here. We don't have a closing song, just so you know. But yeah, I remember specifically feeling like the main reason I didn't want to do ministry is because I didn't want to be broke. That was always my attitude. Our family struggled a lot financially when I was a kid as well, with ministry life. And so I was like, God, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be broke. I don't want to have that feeling. So that's why I'm not doing ministry. And so that was hard for me. And I said, you know what? I want to do full-time ministry. I quit touring. That was the only other income I had. And did full-time ministry. And the way that started was the first month that I went full-time ministry here, our financial lady, who some of you guys know, came in, and she was like in tears and told me, I don't know what we're going to do. I can pay you half of your check, but I can't pay you the whole thing. And she was like, we don't have anything. She was like, we're actually like $80,000 in debt, and there's nothing in our bank account. I don't know what we're going to do. And I was like, oh, cool. And I remember like telling the Lord, like, see, this is what I'm talking about. Like, literally my first month and I can't get paid. Like, it's not even a big check and I get half of it. Like, really, Lord? All right. And I remember Dom still didn't have a drummer, so he told me, he's like, hey, there's still an open door, man, if you want to go. And I remember telling him that he was being the devil. I was like, get behind me, Satan. Like Jesus told Peter. I was like, no, I know I'm not supposed to tour. Like, I feel like this is a test, man. Don't even offer that to me. I just want you to pray for me. And so I told him no. And the crazy thing is about a couple weeks later, it wasn't like very long at all. She came back into the room when I was finishing some project, and she came in and she said, hey, I need you to look at something. And she showed me this check. And I was like, oh, it's cool, $8,000. We're gonna get the rest of my check for this month. But I'm still thinking, like, what about next month, right? Like, what about the month after that? Like, we're done. And no one knew that we were $80,000 in debt. It wasn't in our newsletter. There was no request that was sent out anywhere. It wasn't public at all. It was just our small staff really knew. And she was like, no, look at it. And I look, and it was actually for $85,000. And so the debt was paid completely in full for the new year, and then we had enough to give the rest of everybody's checks. And so we were completely out of debt that year. And so to me, that was like a little miracle that God was like, hey, see, if you commit, I'll take care of you. Like, just do what I'm asking.
And of course, that never happened again.
No.
So God was testing you.
Yeah, 100%.
God was
Yeah.
Flexing again.
Yeah, he did. He's done that a lot. Yeah.
So you've been in ministry ever since, and you and Leslie, of course, had another child, Lizzie. Mm-hmm. You ended up buying a home. Leslie ended up landing a great job.
Yeah.
That
The Lord's blessing with that one too.
Causes a little stress, but it's a great job. And you and your volunteers have built a powerful youth program, a powerful young adult program. You built a great volunteer worship band, and now you're also ordained. You're my assistant pastor for the Gathering Church. I mean, that's a lot of stuff, a lot of hats. Are you glad you received God's call into ministry? What's He showing you now?
100%. I see kind of the fruit of the labor. I think of like people like David and Lucas, and like if I just kept touring and never really did it, I mean, who knows? I don't know if they would be as involved as they are now. I don't know. So I just feel blessed knowing that. I think the biggest blessing is just knowing that you did what God told you to do. Yeah. Even if the result isn't what you wanted, like luckily for me it has been. I'm blessed to be here, but the real blessing is just knowing that I did what God called, which was to stop touring and to give myself here as much as I can.
So right now Ryan is recording his own CD in our studios, Higher Ground, and why did you decide to do that now? What's going to be on the album? When can we expect it to be released?
Now it feels like I'm on like a talk show. The new album. Let me tell you what.
You're on Table Talk.
No, the one that I'm working on now, it's stuff that I've written over like multiple years and have just never actually gone for it and like applied to record it. So,
well, you actually did start it at one point.
And everything got lost. My computer crashed and there was no way to get it off. So that was kind of like, I was like, why am I doing this? I quit. And then kind of just really felt like I should do it. A lot of people from church have asked over the years for me to do something. So finally doing it, to me, it's something I feel, I'm a creative person and I've always written. So I was like, I should just do something with it. So who knows what that even means? I don't know. I just want to do it. My kids can listen to it maybe in the future when, they're old.
I've heard some of the songs on it. It's going to be a great CD or a great album. So I'm looking forward to it. We'll let you know when he's getting close to the end, probably this year.
They'll definitely at least be like a few releases on Spotify, like in the next few months for sure.
So as the last question in the interview, let me just ask you, you never really said, when did you get saved? I know you prayed when you were 4 years old and you said, "Dear Jesus, come into my heart and help me to stop using drugs." Of course, you weren't using drugs at age 4, but you never did either, which is great. Mm-hmm. But you don't even remember that. When you were 6, you chose to be baptized. When you were in high school, you had that awakening. So when did you say the sinner's prayer, or when did you make the cognizant decision to follow Christ?
Well, the funny thing is the sinner's prayer isn't anywhere in the Bible, by the way, everybody. Like there's no formula to getting saved where you repeat after somebody and your life is changed forever. We've kind of, I think, turned that prayer into like this fairy dust almost in the church. It's like, say these magic words and you're going to heaven. I don't believe that, and mostly because my testimony is a journey with the Lord where God has continuously showed me himself and has rebuked me of things, has corrected things, has given me grace. And I think that's really what being saved is. You look at the disciples, that's all they were doing, right? They were learning and discipling and following Jesus. And like, that's what salvation is. It's following the Lord and saying, God, like, I want you to direct me. And if I'm off course, like, shift it, correct it. And so I just feel like I've always been his and he's always been mine.
In fact, in Song of Solomon 2:16, it says, "I'm my beloved's and he is mine, and his banner over me is love." And I really think that's a good way to end today, is just you have always seen God in your life. He's always worked in your life. You can look and see where he's worked and how he still continues to work today. He loves you immensely. I love you immensely.
Oh, I love you too.
Yeah.
They were pretty good.
Yeah.
Don't
remember
they did
Mary
a good
and
job.
Joseph with losing Jesus. It's just Thank you for interviewing today. Appreciate
for sure.
it. Will you close us in prayer?
Father God, we thank you, Lord, so much for who you are, God. We thank you for your grace, for your protection, for your guidance. Lord, for every step of my life, for your grace. Lord, just pray, God, that you would help all of us to continue to mature and to grow in faith, Lord, that we wouldn't ever just become someone who stays in one place, God, but that you would always move us, that you would always give us new things. Lord, we thank you for the fullness of life, and we thank you, Lord, that you're a God who has character, Lord, a God who is loving, a God who has a sense of humor, Lord, and a God that has a plan for each and every one of us. And so, Lord, we pray that we would be sensitive to that plan, that our ears would be open, that our hearts would be open, and that we would be willing to follow wherever you lead. And we just pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. God bless you all. Have a great day. We'll see you next week for our study in Hebrews.